Well, I wanted to welcome Grammy winning, Emmy winning composer, arranger, pianist, saxophonist, Gordon Goodwin, also known as the leader of the Gordon Goodwin Big Phat Band. Thank you so much for being on the Everything Saxophone podcast.
Thank you, Donna. It's my pleasure to be here too. I see you led. You see in the intro, you led with the awards. You didn't say I'd like to welcome saxophonist.
That's true.
you
Well,
got to lead with the bling, I guess.
well, listen, it's well-deserved bling, and we're going to be talking about, all the recent nominations coming up for the upcoming Grammy Awards this, 2024, this February, I think it is.
Yeah.
And but more importantly, also, I do want to get into your saxophone past, and I certainly want to get into that because I want to see how that relates to how you've evolved into composing and arranging such, I think, incredibly intricate compositions and stuff. So that being said, I'm really curious, what was your first instrument that you played? Was it saxophone or was it piano?
No, it was piano. I started piano lessons in kindergarten,
Oh, wow.
and I didn't choose to do it. My parents kind of had an edict: "You're going to do this," and I was not interested. And my piano teacher perceived that I wasn't particularly interested. And I don't know what compelled her to do this, but one day she said to me, "Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. If you play your scales, next week I'll let you write a song." And I looked at her, I said, "Well, what does that even mean? I'm in kindergarten.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what a song, you write it? How does that work?" So, but I was a cooperative kid, so I practiced my scales and hand exercises a little bit. The next week, she gave me the left hand of a little 4-bar, maybe 8-bar piano piece, and she goes, "Now you write the right hand in."
Wow.
So I wrote some dumb thing, and she goes, "Good, good. Okay, now next week I want you to write all by yourself. I want you to write in March." And I said, "Well, what is a march?" And she goes, it's dun, 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 dun. She kind of sang something, played a little something. So I went home and kind of remembered what she played and wrote a march. It was maybe 4 bars or 8 bars short, and it wasn't particularly good, but I did it. And then the next week she goes, "All right, we're going to do a waltz, and the next week we're going to do a polka." And so she had me writing music really early, and it planted that in my head that I guess you can create things, that are just specific for me. So probably from kindergarten through maybe 5th or 6th grade, I was writing little piano pieces. Um, I did write a piece like for 2 trumpets, kind of like Tijuana brass thing. I did do that. I remember that because I really loved Herb Alpert at the time. And and then it was in 7th grade that my high school band director set me down. He says, "I'd like you to listen to this record. It's by a guy named Count Basie. And I want you to just sit here and listen to this. You need to hear this." And so he puts it on. And it was a song by Sammy Nestico called "The Queen Bee." And I listened to it, and I had one of those epiphanies, like in the movies where like the camera goes, and I said, "Oh man, this is what I want to do." I didn't know what do meant, but my band director named Robin Snyder, who parenthetically passed away, what's today? 3 days ago at the age
Oh,
of 99.
wow.
And he was the one that, said, "You can do it. I want you to write a song for our band." And I said, "I don't know how to do that." He goes, "You figure it out."
Wow.
And he was right. That's kind of what composers do. They just kind of figure it out, So, so the journey started in kindergarten, and then, like most people, I started clarinet in 4th grade, and then saxophone. I had just started playing saxophone in 7th grade when Robin introduced me to Count Basie.
Wow, that's interesting. You know what's really intriguing to me? Okay, so your piano teacher in kindergarten, second lesson, it seems, second lesson,
Early,
and
yeah, pretty early, yeah.
just start writing. That's almost overwhelming. I can't even imagine.
As I consider it now, and as I can remember my own kids in kindergarten, um, I don't know if they would have even had any idea how to embark on that. I don't know, what it was. And believe me, the pieces I wrote, I wasn't a budding Mozart, by any means. Um, but once again, the fact that I did it at all, I guess, was saying something. But most notably was that she thought to say that to me, and
Yeah.
and kind of nudge me down that road.
Have you ever, okay, I'm just curious, have you ever contacted her like years later after you've written a lot more pieces and stuff like that and asked her what over you
I tried to so many times, and I think she moved from the house that she was in when I would go there each week. Um, and I just lost track of her. Her name is Janet Hodges. I mentioned her name interview after interview. She is, if she's still with us, she's not reached out. So I haven't been able to thank her properly. But I have been able to thank Sammy Nestico before he passed. He and I became friends because he was a source of great inspiration. And I was able to express my love and appreciation to Robin Snyder before he passed the other day. And I also uh, I got a phone call during COVID from Herb Alpert, and I'd met him kind of in passing a couple times, but I don't think he really knew who I was or anything. But somehow he got into it, and he called me during COVID, and I didn't know the number. I go, this is Malibu. Well, okay, hello, and it's, hey Gordon, this is Herb Alpert, and I said, you're gonna have to give me a minute. That's I said, do you realize that you were the one that inspired me, to put my first band together and to start to. Uh, I actually used to mow the grass in our neighborhood. I would get paid $1 a yard, and I did enough yards that I could save $12 to buy the Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass songbook. So I told him that story, and we talked on the phone for probably an hour, and we kind of became friends, and I was able to thank him.
That's
And he was just like, oh man, I was so lucky to even be in the position I was. Completely self-effacing and humble for a billionaire. But of course, this is a man whose philanthropic efforts are just, beyond reproach. He
yeah.
really has taken on that role as to the gift that he was given. He goes, well, I want to give it back, and I want to try to nurture, people that are into music. So anyway, that's always a long-winded answer to your question. I wasn't able to contact Mrs. Hodges, but fortunately, a few of the other early sources of inspiration, I have been able to express that. And the interesting thing, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for me. Somehow, I needed to do that.
Interesting.
And I did the same thing to John Williams. I cornered him. I cornered him at a party after we did a gig with the Boston Pops a long time ago. And I said, hold on. I said, you hear this every day. You have to hear it one more time from me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I have to thank you for what you've done to inspire me, And he was really cool too. He was like, and I could tell, yeah, he does hear that every day. And it's informed my approach when fans or kids come up and they want to talk about, their appreciation for the Big Phat Band. And I let them talk. Because it's embarrassing sometimes to accept a compliment, Not all of us are good at it. I used to deflect it. I used to come up with kind of witty excuses like, oh, well, these guys are a bunch of divas and, blah, 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 blah. I just would, or they'll talk about an old chart that I wrote. And I'll say, well, that old chestnut, boy, I may have to buy that back from you because I can't stand by that music anymore. I would say stuff like that until I realized it was disrespectful. They had this opinion, and I had no business judging what they're inspired by or what they're not. So I did learn about that through watching people like Sammy and Herb and, and John Williams, accept, what people wanted to say to them, even though they've heard it, thousands of times before.
Sure. And you know what I'm really curious about, where you are now, having achieved all that you have and being so honest and transparent about accepting compliments. And people don't realize when they're giving them, they don't realize that sometimes the person receiving it, it's like, it's difficult for them, right? So, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so glad that you shared that. But looking back, at your 4-year-old self, your 5-year-old self playing the piano, could you ever have envisioned doing what you're doing, having done what you've done.
I don't think my 20-year-old self could have really pictured, how things might have unfolded. I was a band geek. I was a shy kid. And even though music gave me a little bit of confidence because I knew, well, this is kind of my lane. I think I can do this. But I didn't start the Big Phat Band until I was 40. And
Okay.
I remember I was on stage at Warner Brothers and we're conducting this big orchestra on a movie or something. And I dreaded it. I would go to work and we would have like, whatever that movie was, we were doing maybe 2 weeks of recording sessions. And I would think, what's the matter with you, man? You're going to this world-class, recording studio, the best musicians in the world, and you get to stand on a podium and conduct them. What's your problem? And as I considered it, I started to think, well, here I am. I'm conducting someone else's music. I'm orchestrating it, making it sound as good as it can. When I'm at Warner Brothers, I write the music they like. When I go to Disney, I write the music that they want me to write. And it's an honorable way to make a living, but is that it?
Oh, wow.
Should I plant my own flag? It's not ever. Then I go, I'm 40. Is there more road behind me than ahead of me? Who even knows, right? So I started to seriously consider things like legacy or whatever. And so at that time, I would go home at night. Like the Warner Brothers, we were doing animation projects for them, and it was really intensive. The music is very complicated to write. So if you can get maybe 2 minutes composed a day, that's a good day.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's a long day. I would get up and work from 9 in the morning until probably 10 at night
Wow.
with a dinner break and a lunch break. But then after that, I'd sit down and I'd write a chart. After that realization that I was wasting my time, I went back to my 13-year-old self. I said, this is what the music that I believe in. Let's go. What do you want to do? So I just started writing, and one of the first charts I wrote was a song called Sing Sang Sung. And then I wrote a song called Shake Your Bones, and Count Bubba was in there somewhere. So I'm writing this stuff after maybe not written big band music for 5 or 6 years, something like that. And after about 6 months working from 10 to 1 in the morning, I'm exhausted, but I'm doing it. And I've got young kids too. So I got to get my kids up at 6 a.m. and get them to school and make their lunches and,
Wow.
all that. Anyway, after 6 months, I had about maybe 8 charts, and I called up, some of the friends, my good friends, Wayne Bergeron and Jerry Hay, and said, would you guys want to go to the studio and record this music? And so we did. And I had no idea that I was going to go beyond that. I thought I'll just record it and I'll have it. And that's it. And then I thought, well, maybe I should try to get a record deal. Well, how do you do that? I didn't know. So, one thing led to another. I got a record deal. And then all of a sudden our first gig opportunity came. And then we're on stage. It was actually at my college alma mater, Cal State Northridge. Got a gig playing there. And I remembered, this is what it's like. We play the music and it gets out to the audience and they react to it and send that energy back to us, which doesn't happen in a recording studio.
Yeah.
Only in a live environment. And I go, oh my, this is why we started playing music in the first place. So then I started to think, maybe I can do this. Can I do it? Well, these guys follow me. Well, they turned down other work to be in my band. I didn't know. So it took a lot of time for me to get to that point where I felt like I could pull that off. And the question would circle in my head, well, what if you would have done it when you were 30? Where would you be now? Truth is, I couldn't have done it when I was 30. I wasn't ready. And that's just it. You're ready when you're ready. And so finally, at age 40 is when I was able to get the temerity to see if I could put a band together and make it work.
Oh, this is such a great story, and there's so many things I'm thinking about when you're saying this, and I'm thinking, okay, you wrote this music for animation, right? And you're saying it's
Yeah.
complex, it's intricate, and then I said to you before we started, listening to one of your pieces that's up for it's nominated for a Grammy, and I'm thinking Cutie and the Dragon. I'm thinking, gosh, it's so lifelike. Like I feel like if I close my eyes, I could picture like various scenes and all this kind of thing. It's animated. And then, you're saying you worked with animation, all that experience led to these incredible
Right,
compositions that you're doing.
right, and that speaks to the fact you never know what doors are going to open vis-a your hard work. So if you just stay in the game and keep trying to grow every day, you just let it flow. I've really become a believer in that, and that there's some sort of a universal flow of things. And I used to, as a composer, we're used to, I must control this. I will, control every voicing and every counter melody, and I will make sure that this is all fitting together. There's a little bit of that kind of comes with the dinner. And yet the best artists are those that just open themselves up to whatever's supposed to happen. And then I don't know where it comes from. We could have that discussion. But since I learned to do that, I would watch people like Chick Corea play, and I'm watching him, and he's in this, I don't want to call it a trance because he seems perfectly aware, but he's not judging anything. He's not trying to do anything. It's just happening, and he's letting it happen. Now, he's a genius, non-parallel, so, we'll give him that. But I think that that's something that maybe we all could aspire to, not just when we're on the bandstand, but in our daily lives as we interact with everybody. I think it becomes more of an organic interaction if we just let it unfold. And sometimes that puts us at risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we have to, we spend so much of our lives pretending to be something we're not, pretending to know things that we don't know, protecting ourselves from injury, from what people say or do. And maybe the key is let yourself get injured, but know that you're going to stand up after that, and probably you're going to learn from that injury. So anyway, that's another long-winded answer. But to your point about the Beauty and the Dragon sounded the way it did, well, there's a good reason. I lived it. When I was writing for Warner Brothers, I learned all about Carl Stalling and Raymond Scott, and I studied those guys. I got deep in the weeds, with their language, because that's what we were supposed to do on the gig at the time. So when this opportunity came around with Quartet San Francisco, and Jeremy Cohen, who's the principal violinist and leader of that group, asked if I was interested. I said, "Well, let's go. So, and then that led to Cutie, which was really an unfinished composition by Raymond Scott that he wrote for and with his granddaughter, Kathy. And I met Kathy on the Zoom session not long ago, and she was 12 or 13, and he was trying to write this little thing for her, and she played the viola. And so all I had was one sheet of paper with some scribbles, and some of them in alto clef, and no chord changes. It was just a single line of some melodies.
Oh my gosh.
But I knew enough of Raymond Scott that I asked the Scott family, would you give me permission to finish this? I promise you, I know this man. I think I know where it would go. And they were great about it. And I wrote a bridge. There was no bridge, so I added a bridge kind of in the style that he might, and just kind of put it together brick by brick. And now here we go. It was honored with the Grammy nomination. So who even knows, But if you just kind of follow your gut, and it can lead to bountiful things, I think. I really believe that.
Yeah, and there's so much to unpack from this because there's a number of things that you said in terms of, allow yourself to get injured, knowing that you'll get up, and you'll still be able to move on and all that kind of thing. And you may learn something from that. That's great. That's a great outlook. Absolutely. Because, we can't always please everybody. So, there's going to be criticism coming from, people that are misinformed, informed, or whatever the case may be. But what really just, what you just said, though, I knew that, and we talked before this, but also in researching this, Raymond Scott's composition wasn't complete, but I didn't know it was a single page, and I didn't realize there were no chord changes and there was barely anything there. That's crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. But he wasn't a guy that notated things typically. You could tell his not that composers, handwriting is indicative of the quality of their music. You look at Beethoven, see how tortured it was for him, as opposed to Mozart's, which was just, he was in the flow, I believe. Maybe Beethoven got there a different way. But Raymond Scott, he liked to get it in his head, and he would sing the parts to the guys in his band. And so he didn't really notate, and the guys would just learn them by ear. And these were schooled musicians, but that's just his process. And it's amazing because his music was pretty complex, but he held it in his head, and he was able to sing it or somehow articulate it to the guys in his band. And so there's a lot of ways to get it done. I believe in notation. I mean, that's kind of where I came from, but I really don't notate with a pencil and paper anymore. I'm in the computer full time now, and it's made me better. The technology has actually made me better. I don't make as many mistakes, especially when I'm composing a longer form piece, because a lot of times in the old days I'm playing it on the piano, and I have to perform it to assess it as I'm playing. And if something doesn't quite pay off, I don't know, did I just not play that well enough? Or is there some fundamental structural problem? Whereas with my computer, I just hit the space bar and sit back, and I can assess it without being involved in the playback, which is really makes all the difference. So one way or the other, I have to capture it. Sometimes I will sing it on a voice memo. Get my phone out, because a melody will come to me when I'm driving, and I'll go, oops, and I'll just sing it and then put it away. And because it can be elusive. I mean, I've got so much crap in my head. I need to reformat my hard drive. Really, it's just a data storage, just like any other drive, And I think I need to clean it up there, but I don't know if they have that technology yet.
That would be awesome.
So for now, I just have to download it into something, and that's the quickest way for me. Play it into the computer, and then I'm good.
That's okay. This is great, because I was going to ask about your composing process. So, with a lot of people, they have the phone handy, ideas come at the craziest times, to record it in the memos thing, whatever. So now here's the thing, you're a very accomplished pianist, right? So your composing process is, you may hear something in your head, you're going to get to your computer, you're going to play it into the computer. What are you using, Sibelius, Finale, or something else?
Well, I composed into Digital Performer.
Okay.
I orchestrate into Finale. So, it is a interesting thing, though, about how music comes to you. Because when I was young, I studied with a guy named Albert Harris, who was an old timer, worked at Universal Studios as a staff orchestrator. And so I went to him, and I was maybe right out of college, and I said, look, Mr. Harris, I feel like when I'm writing for certain instruments, they don't quite have the same integrity. Like, I understand saxophones and trumpets and trombones, but if I have to write for the oboe or a violin thing, I don't know if I really understand the instrument well enough. It sounds like a violin part for a while, then it doesn't. He goes, well, Goodwin, you're writing for piano. You're not writing for the violin. You need to write specifically for the instrument, not for the piano, and then assign it to an instrument. That's how I was taught to orchestrate. Write it, kind of in concert key, and then assign it to the different instruments. So he goes, here's what I want you to do. So he got a big piece of score paper, and he goes, okay, these top two lines, strings. Next two lines are brass. Next two are woodwinds. Here's percussion, harp, and piano. Write 8 bars. Go. He goes, but don't you dare write a note until you know its orchestrational destination. And so I was used to sitting at the piano and going, finding a chord or a little, finding my way to something. And that was what he was saying. Nope, don't you write a note until you know who's going to play it and why. Wow. And it was paralyzing. And it took me 20 minutes, but finally I got 8 bars. And I had to relearn that. So now when music comes to me, it's kind of more or less there. I know the intent of it. I might not know some of the little details. Like, it might come to me like, Okay, now I'm not really singing pitches, but I'm singing a concept. So if I can get the concept down, then I can go back and go, what were those? Oh yeah, and I could get to the small details. So that's one thing, big picture or little picture. And when you're in the big picture, that's where the flow happens. And you can get from here to here with integrity and continuity. If you stop to do little details here, you might lose your way for where you're going. So I like to try to do the big picture thing and then not worry about the little details. I can go back later and address those issues.
One question
That makes sense?
oh, absolutely. And one question I have also, okay, we're going to talk about like, your saxophone, studies and playing and all that
Yes.
kind of thing in a minute. But when you're orchestrating and all that kind of thing, have you tried to play all of the instruments that you orchestrate for?
At one point in my life, I've pretty much held every instrument and tried to, get a feel for what it's like. The harp was a bitch.
I was going to ask you that.
Oh, but I was fortunate that I had, a harpist in town that she let me sit down and she showed me how the pedals worked, and it's just, there's no substitute for sitting there,
Yeah.
the violin too, because there are intervals that seem like a long interval for a wind player when with a violin, it's just from here to here, because of the way it's laid out. So, stuff like that really informs, and I don't think you can ever learn everything about it. I think it's a lifelong pursuit, but definitely holding the instruments in my hand and has made a big difference. The other thing is I need to hear my music pretty soon after I write it because there's like thousands of little decisions you make. And then if you can hear it soon, those decisions are still in your head. You can kind of remember, oh yeah, I did this instead of this. And then when you hear it, you can decide, oh yeah, that was a good call, or maybe that wasn't as good a call. The newer generation of composers that didn't come up playing in bands like we did,
Yeah.
that didn't, are more used to dealing with samples. It's a whole other discipline. And I had to adjust my writing style to make sure I wrote stuff the samples could do.
Oh,
Because if I'm scoring a film and I have to do a mock-up for the director, I can't go to him and say, now this will be much better with the real string section. He's going to be like, whatever. The cue sucks. So I have to write things that pay off emotionally based on what the samples can do. And the samples have gotten much better than they used to be. But that was another adjustment, that I did have to make. And, I think that staying flexible in your worldview, especially with the advent of all the technology, technology's advancing faster and faster, I
yeah.
think you got to stay in the game and willing to make those adjustments in order to stay relevant.
What's interesting about what you said is when we were growing up playing in bands and stuff like that, but yet some of the younger people coming onto the scene may have not had that experience. I think,
Right.
in my own opinion, having that experience of not being born in such a technological world and having to, experience things differently,
Yeah.
more organically, I think that also puts more, that's one of the reasons why I think your music has life to it, has
Mm.
character to it. And again, this is my own opinion, but I'm just thinking about
That's-
like your experience and stuff like that. And I'm thinking about someone who maybe is starting to produce music or is using samples or whatever, and may not have had that experience of playing in
Yeah.
bands or this and this and that.
Well, Donna, I think it's a fundamental question for young people because if you think about it, so when I was in college, and if I needed to find the range of the E flat contra clarinet, bass clarinet, right? I probably had to get up and go to the library and look through the index cards and find that book and go get the book and look at it. Oh, and maybe copy that information down. I had to earn it,
Yeah.
Whereas, and I couldn't tell you what the range is right now, but I could find it right here in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
The question is, when I get information via the internet, it goes in and out quick. Whereas if you make the investment to get it, it seems like it sticks a little better. So here we have a generation of young people that have gotten all their information in this way. And I don't know that it's better or it's worse. It certainly is different. And and I think about when it comes to music in general. Think about in Mozart's time, you want to hear music. What did you have to do to be able to even hear it? You had to get out of your house and take your horse and buggy and go downtown and find a little brass group or a string quartet. You had to seek it out.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, when not only can we hear music, we can hear any specific piece of music that we want, the touch of a button. I think about those people back in the day, and it must have been just freaking magic for them.
Yeah.
Just to hear the miracle of music, in a world that needed it. I don't know. Our world needs it more than ever, and I think we have just a noisy landscape that we live in, and I try to remind myself, whenever I'm weighed down by an issue or whatever, I go, get some music and just sit with the music and get rid of the other distractions. It works every time for me. It's impossible to maintain a negative, viewpoint when I'm listening to uplifting music. It's impossible. So, but it's an interesting dilemma, I think, for young people to kind of plot or understand their worldview, given how technology has changed things.
It's also brings up other things too. There is a lot of noise, and this is, what technology has brought us, because, people the attention spans have gone down, drastically, and everything's at the tip of our fingers, so to speak. And the big thing is cutting through the noise. So let me ask you this question. Your experiences led you to where you are today, right? But let's say you were a young person, right? Let's say you're in your, mid-20s and that kind of thing. And I don't even know if you could even answer this, but can you see yourself, like, how would you cut through the noise?
As a young person.
Yeah, if you weren't,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like if you were just
I
25
know.
years old.
I remember that there was noise when I was that age, and some of the noise is just the instincts you have as a young person to get out there and hang with your friends and go to parties and do young people stuff. I felt that same pull, and yet I knew that there were some people on Friday night in the music building at school practicing, till 10 or 11 at night.
Yeah.
When I'm hanging out, they're working, they're practicing, and so that wore on me. I remember thinking, oh boy, how am I going to pay for this? I'm hanging out with my friends. I need to do that. It feels good, but am I going to pay for it at some point along the road? And that's one thing that I find myself saying to young people, which whether it lands or not, I don't know. But I tell them how fast it goes. The time just goes so quickly. And so before you know it, you think you're busy now. Just wait. Wait till you meet somebody. And then you get married, you pop out a couple of kids, and then you're done. You think you have time, to do your long tones? You think you have time to learn a new instrument or to, explore something different? It's because you have to choose between, finding a reed on your clarinet or going to your kid's basketball game, going to your daughter's dance recital. Make that choice. See how that goes for you, right? So it's just kind of a pattern of life, that happens. So when you're in your 20s, you better make hay. You better lay the groundwork, because if you lay the groundwork in your 20s, then you're going to be in pretty good shape to like put the foundation of your life on that work that you did. But I don't know if when I say that to kids, if it just kind of goes, whatever, old guy, whatever you think, But it feels right to me. It feels true to me. And I think I got in under the wire. I had so many problems with when I was in high school. I never really took a saxophone lesson. So my embouchure was completely messed up. And I have to, on this podcast, I have to tell my Phil Woods story.
Yeah.
Because Phil Woods moved to LA and I was a senior in high school. And my friend John Yoakum, who was a great saxophone player and oboe player, recently kind of retired, but he was, really beautiful sound. And he said, "Hey, Gordon, Phil's in town, and I just took a lesson, and it was so great. You should call him up." I said, "Oh man!" So I got his number, and I called up Phil, and he goes, "All right, why don't you come over on Saturday, and we'll see what's going on." So I go to the place he was staying, and I get my alto out, and I start to. He goes, "Play me something." So I just start to improvise whatever. I don't know what it was. I wasn't even playing a song. I was just messing around. He goes, "Ha ha ha! Hey man, play a song. Just play a song." So I go, "Oh yeah." So I play da 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 da. I did a little grace note at the top. Da 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 da. He goes, "Why'd you do that? Why'd I do what? The grace note? Yeah, why'd you do that?" Just a style thing, I guess. And now I'm starting to realize this is going poorly. He goes, "Man, you got to get your shit together before you come to me. How dare you?" And I thought, is he doing a bit? I just got back from playing the Monterey Jazz Festival in some all-star band. I had made the first band at Cal State Northridge as a freshman. I'm thinking, here we go, baby, right? And he hates me. My saxophone idol hates me. And he goes, hey, Vic, come here. And this other guy walks in. He goes, "Give me your horn, kid." So I hand my horn to this other guy who goes, he goes, "Horn's okay," hands it back to me. And then Phil goes, "You're going to have to study with Vic. I'm out of here." Wow. So he walks away, and Vic sits down. He goes, "All right, kid, here's what I see right away." He goes, look at your embouchure. You got rolling your lip up like that. You got, and the reed is being choked. You got to roll your lip out. Give it a pad, man. Where do you think the sound comes from? The reed's got to vibrate. Roll your lip out like this. Put the mouthpiece. No. He goes, "Play a low B flat." So I'm like, "Oh." He goes, no, yeah, you try it again. Oh, and I can barely control it. And Phil Woods is in the kitchen. I can see him like about 10 feet away. He's looking at me like this.
Oh my God.
So, long story, Vic fixes my embouchure. First time, and he goes, "First of all, where'd you get that mouthpiece, man?" I go, "I don't know. I went and bought it in the store." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Here." He gave me one of his mouth. "You're gonna play this." He goes, "And I got to get you a different ligature." And I never thought about any of that stuff. So he straightened me out, and got my sound was better. And then I started to study at Northridge with a guy named Bill Calkins, who kind of helped me with my breath support. And I studied classical saxophone all through college. Not something I would have picked, but it helped my phrasing. It helped my sound, my breathing so much, And but once again, I almost fell off the edge of the cliff before I saved myself. You think I would have learned, right? So then when I'm about 25, I get a gig playing piano with Johnny Mathis. And it's a pretty big gig. And one of the things I have to do is play this big West Side Story kind of concerto-like thing. And I'm playing it, and my wrists are cramping up, like, oh, ow. So I go to this classical piano teacher named Mark Richmond. I say, "Hey, man, I got a problem." He goes, "I can't fix you, man. Your cartilage is done. I can't do it." I go, You have to help me. I have this gig and I can't, He goes, "All right." So I studied with him for a year. And he taught me, he goes, "First of all, why are you holding your breath?" I go, "I'm holding my breath?" He goes, "Yeah. Here's you. When you're playing a difficult pet, you go like this. Wow. You got to breathe with the music. What's the matter?" I thought you were a saxophone player. I go, "Well, I am." He goes, "And yet you're not breathing. You got to breathe." He goes, and let your hands, if you're going, let your hands flow with the music. Let your body flow with the music. I had never thought about any of that stuff. He goes, "Your piano bench is the wrong height. Why do you have it so low?" I never thought about it. He goes, "Yeah, you didn't." So anyway, all these little details, the nuts and bolts, of proper technique was never given to me. And that's why when I talk to people that are self-taught and feel like that's an option and they're proud of what they did, okay, as far as it goes, that's great, but you're probably not going to get everything. And you might get some details wrong that are going to sink your ship, like it almost did with my piano playing and almost did with my saxophone playing. So those are two seminal events that happened for me when I was in my 20s. And so since then, I've learned to just slow down, not be afraid of the work, because if I do the work, it's going to lead to the moment that I crave, which is playing the music and interacting with the music and with the other musicians. That if you can earn your way to that position, there's nothing better. It's the most intimate, magical thing in the world to play music with people that are of a like mind. There's nothing like it, which is why as a composer, I've really worked hard to keep my playing to the level where I can get on stage with Eric Marienthal and belong there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and that's really important too. And I was going to ask about that. How do you find the time, are you just playing tenor sax? Are you playing a bunch of instruments? Like, how do you find the time to practice?
Well, I did make a decision about time about 15 years ago when I put the flute and the clarinet in the closet where they belong. But I had a recording session, and the session was for tenor sax and flute. And I was always pretty good on the flute. I wasn't. I could play in tune. My sound was okay, but I would just be able to tuck in under Dan Higgins, let his sound fill it out, and I would just kind of tuck in under there. I was never playing like the top flute part or anything, and hardly ever any piccolo. But I get on this session, it's with a 40-piece orchestra, and one part comes up and it's for alto flute, which I didn't even own. So I'm looking around, and my friend Greg Hawkins goes, here. He throws me his alto flute. I go, yeah, but can you play it? And he goes, no, I got to play bass clarinet. So I put the flute together, and the conductor goes, here we go. 3, 4. And I didn't get the chance to even play one note to warm up. And I'm sitting there, and I'm blowing through the horn, and then we get to the first thing, and it's a solo. And it's low, and it's really sustained, and the tempo is slow as can be, and I am completely hosed. And so I'm like going, at the first note I played on this instrument is being recorded, So I limp through this thing, and we do another take. It gets only marginally better. So we took a break, and I went into the control room, which musicians aren't really supposed to do. But I went in there and I said to the composer, I go, you got to do that again, and you have to have Greg overdub that alto flute part. He looks at me, he goes, it's fine. I don't think it was fine, man. I think it was way less than fine. I didn't know it was for alto flute. I wouldn't have taken the gig. I don't play it. But he goes, it's fine. We got to move on. So I know he had music to get to. And so I said after that, I'm never doing that again. Never. I'm not going to do that to another composer or to another. I'm not going to do it to myself. So I just said, no more flute, no more clarinet. And I stopped playing the alto sax very much too. So now I play tenor and soprano, and then I play my piano, and do my writing. And that's kind of where I live. It was hard. I miss playing the flute, but at some point, there's only so many hours, and you have to make a choice. It's watching that Leonard Maestro movie, about Lenny, and it talks about kind of implies about all the different disciplines that he had as conductor, composer, pianist, educator, and each one which would demand 100% of your life's attention. And so I related to him going down his conducting road, and then now I'm going to go another composing road. And of course, composing for Broadway musicals and concert pieces, and then go down his educator road, and how it can feel like you're spinning plates to try to keep everything up at the right level. But I learned something from a musician named James Morrison, who you may or may not have heard from. He's from Australia. He's one of those guys that plays everything and at a very high level. He plays trumpet like Maynard or Clifford Brown. He plays trombone like Frank Rosolino. He plays piano like Oscar Peterson. He plays guitar, plays the bass. He writes He composes. He writes novels, like he writes science fiction novels. He flies airplanes. He drives race cars, sailboats. He does everything. And I talked to him about it. He goes, well, I just don't use words like hard. Like the trumpet is so different from the saxophone. That's a hard transition. I don't like the word. I use the word challenging because you can meet a challenge. So I've adapted that for my life. So when somebody says, well, that chart's really hard, I kind of let the guys in the Phat Band, I go, we didn't use it. We don't use that word. Call it challenging. That's cool. Because hard is kind of predispositions you to the outcome. Oh, this is going to be hard. So James, we were doing a gig at the Blue Note in Tokyo, and we did this first night, and the second night we were in the green room, and everybody's warming up and everything, and he's just kind of sitting there, and I said, James, where are your horns? He goes, oh, they're on stage. Oh, okay. Do you want me to have somebody get them for you? He goes, I just left them up there. I'll be fine. So everyone else is going, and James is just sitting there, and he walks on stage, picks up his trumpet and goes, and it's all up here. He doesn't have the physical obstacles that many of us adopt. He doesn't have it. Right now I'm a trumpet player. I'm not thinking about my race cars. I'm not thinking about my piano playing. I'm a trumpet player. And so I started to do that. Because with a Big Phat Band, I'm playing piano most of the night, and I have maybe one saxophone solo. And so I start to look at my horn, and I might reach over and blow some air into it, But otherwise, I just pick it up. Now I'm a sax player. Go. I used to have a lot of anxiety about it. And I said, man, if you're going to have that much anxiety, then just don't do it. Don't play a solo. The audience doesn't care. They just want to hear you play or don't play, but don't bring that anxiety onto the bandstand. The bandstand's sacred. All the shit that I say all the time, I realize I have to kind of live up to that. So, the question about balancing all those things has changed for me. I used to think if I advocate this much time to this practice and this much time to that practice and to try to control it, like I used to want to always do to everything, that was the answer. But it turns out the answer was to give up the control and just let it come to me.
Okay.
I know it sounds a little woo-woo-y, I know it does.
No, it's not
I know
at
it
all.
sounds a little bit.
But here's my question. So like giving up control and stuff like that, but you still have to make the time to keep your chops in shape and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So then I'm curious about this because I mentioned a couple of times, like, your charts. Yeah, they are challenging. They're intricate, and there's some really very challenging lines, with lots of like big interval leaps and all that kind of thing. Let's see, when you're thinking of this, you're hearing it in your head. You're trying to think of the instrument that's going to play it. Like, how did you develop some of these, like, in some sense, quirky type of like melodies and stuff like that?
I think it came about primarily because of, in a broad sense, I'm a really lucky guy. I've had a pretty fortunate life. I haven't had a lot of bad things happen to me, or the things that have happened to me, I've had the resources, or to be able to start over if I had to. I had a heart attack last year, and it wasn't one of those, it was, I was sitting right here in this chair, and I felt like weird back pain, and I go, what is that? I thought I strained a shoulder, and I just felt a little bit weirdly, I don't know if it's the word tight is the word, but I just felt off. And I'm sitting here, and I went up and I took my blood pressure, which wasn't that bad, a little bit high, and then I thought, Gordo, quit messing around. What are you doing? So I got in the car and drove myself to the ER. It was raining, pouring down rain, and I'm driving, trying to get there. And I get there, and if you go to the ER and mention chest pain, you're at the top front of the line, right? Yeah. So they did an EKG, and then the cardiologist he comes up to me and he's looking at me like, tell me what happened. Because I found out later the cardiologist and the ER docs were arguing about what was going on with me. The ER docs thought I was having a heart attack. The cardiologist thought I wasn't. So he gets up this close to my eyes. He goes, tell me. I said, well, I was just sitting and he goes, we're going in. Like, you're going in? He goes, no. He goes, we're gonna take a picture. So he took a picture and he found the one artery 99% blocked, other artery 80% blocked. The Widowmaker was 99% blocked. So he goes, we're going in, we're putting 2 stents in. And so 10 minutes later, he was done. And I felt like $1 million. What? And I was fine before that, but a little bit off. I knew I was a little bit off. And we had just moved, and moving stressful. You kept rationalizing it. Oh, the move was stressful, this and that, a few other things. So anyway, you got through that. And, but I've had such a blessed life. And so because of that, my music is proactively optimistic. I think that's a better way to go through the world with that sense of gratitude. Yeah. And matter of fact, sometimes I have to watch it like I'm scoring a movie right now, and there's a pretty horrible thing that happens, and I gotta remember to keep this is horrible, but it's gonna be okay. Out of this, I need to stay with it. This is horrible, So whatever you're hearing that comes off as quirky and just kind of fun loving or whatever. That's maybe kind of built into, on some level for me. I think I like it. I like that that's kind of the case. But sometimes, this is just a theory I have. Sometimes certain people will consider your music less than artistic unless it has a little pain in it.
Interesting. Unless
they can feel that, you're a starving artist. You're striving, to build yourself up. And, that's a story that people like to hear, so that's never been articulated to me exactly, but it's been a little bit of kind of an observation I've made. It, it doesn't matter what everyone thinks. It really doesn't. The only thing that matters is what you think about what you do. I don't think it matters what the audience thinks. I used to want to write music so the guys in the band would like it. From my very first chart, I remember thinking, I want the guys to like it, because what if they make fun of me? I got to make it so they'll like it. And that kind of became baked into what I did for many, many years, until finally I got kind of busted on a gig I was doing for Disney when I overwrote. I wrote too much of my clever crap in there, and Disney's like, what is this? It's not commercial enough. And I went, commercial enough? What does that mean? But then I realized, man, I'm writing for the guys in the band. So I kind of worked my way through that. But I'm happy that element is there. I think it's music's greatest gift can be that it uplifts us. And I'd rather write music that does that.
And that,
there's plenty of music that will, will lament, about what's going bad in the world right now. And there's a place for that too, but maybe not, maybe that's not my job.
Well, no, definitely listening to your music. It definitely is uplifting, and it's fun, and it's just a lot of fun. I want to go back to that film scoring where you're having to write music for a particular scene where it's horrible. How do you handle that? What do you try to tap into based on what you're saying right here? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a positive guy. You've got a lot of gratitude, and now you have to flip the switch. What did you do to tap into that?
Well, I signed an NDA about this, so I can't really say specifically, but sure. The event is a historical event that we all know about, and it had a great impact it reverberated for years, probably still is affecting our country. So the music I wrote was, and so we're in the minutes leading up to the climactic moment of this scene. We all know what's going to happen because we have read history books. So we're forearmed with that knowledge. So I wrote it like a horror movie, like because we know what was going to happen, but we're not exactly sure how and who is responsible and why. So I kind of had I had colors coming from various directions, like where's this thing coming from behind or from above, who knows. And then I imbued it with sadness as we got closer and closer to this. There's horrific elements and kind of just great sorrow. Now there are intervals and colors that connotate those emotions. So it's kind of my job to make sure that I, write music that conveys that. A lot of that is intuitive, but it did come from years of study. Indiana Jones theme, da 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 da. So that upward interval is one of kind of reaching and aspiring and kind of evocative of heroism.
Yeah.
So there's some laws of physics, I guess, that color our interpretation of certain intervals. So I kind of bring that to bear. But it's a delicate thing because what sounds horrific to me might not sound horrific to the director, and I got to get inside his head.
Yeah.
To know what sounds what makes him scared. I got to scare him because I have to get my cue past his approval to get it to the scoring stage. That's the hardest part of the job, is to find out. And a lot of times the people you're working for aren't exactly articulate in explaining what they want. They might be kind of discovering it along the way as they hear your music. And then they go, well, maybe not this. How about we try this? That's just part of the process. The unfortunate part will be if the release date is here and you're working and you're just revising and revising, the release date's not moving and you're getting closer, you have to get this music done and recorded and mixed and, dubbed into the film with a firm, release date. So, but that's a first world problem, believe me.
Well, let me ask this question because again, going back to kindergarten, first writing experience, right? Seventh grade, writing your first chart. Were you, I know you said you weren't taking any saxophone lessons and that kind of thing, but you're writing, all that kind of thing. Were you getting inspiration from anybody in particular, taking lessons? Like what in those early years gave you enough experience to be able to keep writing charts and stuff like that? What were you doing?
Well, I don't think that my growth was very accelerated at that point. I think I was backing into it still, even though, because I felt a lot of resistance, kind of with like when I put together my Tijuana brass band, and I got a couple of trumpet players to come to my house, and they came one time, and I wanted them to come again, and they were like, well, we got to go to Boy Scouts or something, They just schedule things, and they just weren't as motivated as I was. And I didn't know if they just mean they didn't like the music I wrote. I think they did, but who even knows? I probably was just listening to. I can remember TV shows that I listened to, and like the Batman show, and I listened to the music of Neil Hefti. And he wrote the theme and they did some underscore. And I remember I talked to him when I met him some years ago. And I said, hey, man, I have to tell you, man, the Batman theme had such an impact on me. He goes, really? The Batman theme? Thanks. He goes, all the charts I wrote for Woody Herman, but you land on the Batman theme. I go, I know, man, sorry. I go, well, I bet probably the royalty checks for the Batman theme exceeded Woody's. He goes, oh man, by far, which is a real ironic thing. It took him 5 minutes to write it. He said, it took me 5 minutes to write that. And I made more money off that than anything else. So, but I definitely would watch a lot of Bugs Bunny cartoons. Probably the first time I heard an orchestra was watching those cartoons. The first music I was ever aware of, and I'm told this, I'm not sure that I really remember this or if I've constructed the memory, but my mom tells me I would go up to the TV screen when the Mickey Mouse Club show would come on, and I would wave my hands in the air conducting
Wow.
the Mickey Mouse Club theme. And so I had to have been maybe 3 or something, when that was on. So, which is interesting because my very first commercial writing gig, the one where they busted me for overwriting, was for a Mouseketeer reunion show at Disneyland.
That's right. I remember reading that. That's funny.
This is like right before Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were Mouseketeers. But they brought back all the old guys. They brought back Cubby and Lonnie and Annette and Sharon and all those Mouseketeers from the '50s. So that was kind of a trip. But it was on that gig that first commercial writing gig I ever had, and I got called to task by the music director, like, "What are you doing, man?"
What's interesting what you're saying too. I remember growing up, Generation X, right? So watching TV and the TV show themes. Like I love the theme to Dynasty, to
Yeah, right.
Saint Elsewhere, to Dallas. Really great themes, and then it so upset me when, you get into the 2000s and then, now it's like there's no themes anymore to TV shows. We lost that. And, look, I get it. It's times are totally different. People are more listening to Spotify and whatnot,
Mhm.
Netflix binging and that kind of thing. But even when they're binging on Netflix, like I wish some of these, some of these great shows would have those great themes that we grew up listening to.
I don't know. It's hard for me to understand it too, because it seems like the uh, the theme songs are just so connected, to those shows. I mean, and the shows I listened to really a little earlier, the ones you did, but the theme from Gilligan's Island, I
Oh,
could sing the whole thing now. The theme to Bewitched, Jimmy Genie, all those shows. The themes were probably endured longer than the shows,
yeah.
or helped the show's endurance. So I don't know. I mean, we are in a golden era of TV right now. Some of the streaming shows are really good, really good. And some of them do have themes, actually. Some will take the streaming shows will take time, give you a minute, to establish the mood. But you can skip right past it,
Yeah.
which I find myself doing. Let's get to the show here. So
Guilty here too. I got to say guilty here too. And it's just, it's funny because talking about this, and I'm just thinking, I can hear the theme to Dynasty in my head right now, and thinking about what does that theme mean to me? And that show was like very elitist, and that
yeah,
theme just matched that perfectly.
was that Henry Mancini that
I
did that theme?
I don't think so. I don't remember. I grew up playing trumpet, so I just remember. Oh my God, this is so great! What an incredible trumpet sound. That's what really attracted me to that. As you're checking that out right now. But I
Yeah,
think
if only we had some resource to find. Oh, Bill Conti.
that's it. Yes, that's
Bill
right.
Conti did that theme. Right,
He wrote
right.
a lot of themes. He wrote a lot of themes.
Yeah, he did. I worked with him. He was a musical director for the Academy Awards, so I got to work with him for maybe 4 or 5 years on that program. Good guy. Yeah, I really, really, he's a pro. I remember I went to a master class he did when I was early in my career. It was scoring for film master class, and he was one of the panelists. And at one point, he said, "I don't know why I'm here. I give you all this information, and one of you guys is gonna grow up and take my gigs. So I don't know what the hell I'm doing here."
That's awesome.
It was probably a really relevant point, even though at the time I didn't quite think he was right.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of like big names, I'd be remiss to not talk about your Grammy nomination for your work with Patti Austin.
Oh
So, can you
goodness,
talk
yeah.
about how did that come how did that come to transpire?
We've been friends for some years, and
Okay.
she's sung with a Big Phat Band a number of times, and we were always just so blown away by her musicianship. I mean, she's a great singer, but more than that, she gets it. She doesn't miss a thing as a musician. And so she had already done an Ella Fitzgerald tribute record some years ago, and she approached me. I would like to do another Ella record for her 100th birthday. Would you like to arrange it? And I go, you kidding me? Let's
Oh my
go.
gosh, yeah.
And Patty and I have a real shorthand. Like the arrangement of April in Paris that has a Grammy nomination was a good case in point, because I said, well, how do you want to approach April in Paris? I said, because Count Basie swung it, we could swing it like him. or we could do a more of a romanticized, gay Paris with an accordion and strings. We could do that. She goes, well, I like both of those things. I don't know. So, well, let me think about it. Let me know. And so she never really responded. And so I said, I got to do something. So I got this idea of starting with the accordion and the strings and something, very lush and beautiful, getting into the string section and then bookending it with the accordion and strings. And so I did both. And so I did it and I sent her my demo and she called up. She goes, you son of a, she goes, that's what I was going to tell you to do. So we had all these kind of connections, nonverbal connections as we worked on the project. And it's we're doing a live gig with her here in LA, like a Grammy celebration gig, coming up. And it's so excited to get on stage with her. First of all, she's absolutely hilarious. She can just hold court and tell these incredible stories because she's Quincy Jones' goddaughter. So she knows, everybody. Plus, she had those pop hits in the 80s. How Do You Keep the Music Playing with James Ingram and Baby Come to Me. She was like on the mountaintop, singing more pop music. And she had a career as a jingle singer. She sung on tons of commercials and jingles. And then on other people's records, sang on Steely Dan records and Paul Simon records and whatever. But as far as heir apparent to Ella Fitzgerald, she's it. She really listen to her Ella, and she can scat. I mean, I write stuff with her to sing with the horn section, because she can phrase perfectly with them. It's really a cool thing. So it's really a privilege to have been work on this record with her, and I'm so happy for her that she got this Grammy nomination for the record.
Yeah, I was listening to Mac the Knife, your arrangement, on that album, and
that's the one. Yeah, she sings with the band at the top of that.
That's very cool.
I didn't even think she was going to do it, and then I thought maybe you could sing a few of these licks with us, So she ended up singing every one of them, So.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, listen, I know you've been gracious with your time. I have a couple more questions from some of the podcast listeners for you. Yeah. And one of them is from Joy. And she plays in a whole bunch of situations, but her sax quartet performed Diffusion. And so her question is, have you written any other pieces for sax quartets or ensembles?
I have. I've written a couple since Diffusion. I've written two that were commissioned by individual groups, and the terms of my arrangement with that typically is I give them exclusivity for a year or something. We negotiate that, and then after that, then I can go ahead and publish them or do whatever I want. So those are available. I have to go back and check, but I love the genre. I played in sax quartets when I was in college. Loved it, classical stuff, And the song Hunting Wabbits was basically kind of started as a saxophone piece, as you could probably surmise. And then it kind of morphed from a saxophone piece to a tribute to Carl Stalling and Warner Brothers cartoon music. But I love the genre. And I played, that's another thing, I played in the Disneyland Sax Quartet for a period of time, four of us. And we put our fireman uniforms on and went out and played on Main Street. And half the time, we had Eric Marienthal was in that group. And so was Sal Lozano. Oh, wow. And I was playing baritone sax. So half the time we would just make up head charts, and sometimes we play the existing arrangements. Other times we just do whatever we wanted. It was such a blast.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I was going to ask you actually also about, playing in Disneyland. So you just answered that question. I was wondering with the types of things that you did. People don't realize playing in Disneyland is not easy because, the scheduling, you're constantly on. It's you're on call. The schedule changes. It's a lot of playing. It's pretty demanding.
Yeah, you're outside in the sun, but it's a hard day's work. But I learned how to be a professional there. Right out of college, I got that gig. Playing out, and I would play saxophone in show bands, or I played a little ragtime piano at a little Dixieland in New Orleans Square. I played in the rock and roll band in Tomorrowland. There's a stage that comes out of the ground, would do that. So it was really, I loved it. It was a good situation. You can make a little money. Back in the day, they paid you benefits, got vacation pay, stuff that's a little unheard of, for musicians typically. So it was a good situation.
Was that the first time
I
that you
still
met?
I still work for the company. It's been a lifelong relationship with that company.
Awesome. And was that the first time that you met Eric Marienthal and Sal Levano, or did you know those guys before?
Well, Eric tells me that we met a little bit before that because he was auditioning for an all-state honor band, and I was the saxophone adjudicator. I barely remember it, but he said he auditioned for me. He went to Cal State Northridge, and I go, well, did I put you in the band? He goes, yeah, you did. I go, see, you owe me. You owe me again.
That's
I
awesome.
did meet Sal. I believe I did meet Sal at Disneyland. But once again, lifelong relationships with people that you meet in music. It's really, really wonderful.
Absolutely. All right. And then the other question comes from Gene, and he says this. He asks this: what do you feel makes your arrangements, your big band arrangements, different from other modern big band arrangements?
Well, one thing I decided to do. Well, I didn't really decide it. It was just kind of something that I always believed. When I was in college, I was a jazz snob until they knocked it out of me and said, "No, you're going to study counterpoint and conducting and orchestration and music history." And so I was studying Mozart and Debussy and Tchaikovsky and playing jazz. And then at night, I was playing in a band in a club. So we were playing Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire and, pop music. So I was broadening my point of view, in those formative years. So when I put the band together, I remember thinking, we don't have to just swing like Count Basie. We could play Latin music and funk music. And I had musicians that had that kind of versatility. So I think maybe that's a one broad thing that we do that not every big band does. Many do, of course. The Count Basie band, they just swing. They do it better than anybody, to be sure. But I believe we got to push the barriers down between musical styles. So one flows into the other. So we can't even define them anymore. That's what I wish we could happen. Not only with music, but with people.
Mm.
That we stop defining ourselves by our tribes. That I don't want to be defined by my gender or by my politics or by my race or by, anything other than the totality of everything that I, believe in. That's a kind of a wish that I have. At least musically, that's what we try to do with the Phat Band. Break the barriers down. If we play concert music, like Hunting Wabbits is kind of a concert piece, even though it gets jazzy in the middle. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, and okay, so a couple things here too. I'm just thinking about how you said growing up watching Bugs Bunny, and then you came up
Yeah,
hunting wabbits, right? I mean, that's another
yeah.
full circle
No
theme.
coincidence there. No,
No, not at
no
all.
coincidence there.
But you know what I'm wondering, and I think other people may be wondering too, how did you come up with the name Big Phat Band and the way it's spelled?
Go. Yeah, good question. My agent Stuart came up with it because I didn't want to call it the Gordon Goodwin Big Band, and part of that was the perception was big band was kind of the kiss of death, and I couldn't get a record deal if I called it that. But I didn't want to. I released a big band record in the '80s. It was just called Gordon Goodwin because the record label, let's just call it Gordon Goodwin. We won't tell them it's a big band. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. But it was a stupid idea. What do you think they're not going to figure it out when they hear the first track? So this time around, I said, well, what if we come up with a name that implies big band but doesn't say that? And then my friend Stuart goes, how about the Big Phat Band? I go, what does fat mean? He goes, it's an acronym, and there's a lot of different interpretations of it. What he told me at the time was, I think he said, pretty, hot, and tempting is what he said it meant.
Okay.
There's a lot. There's others that you could name. I said, well, that sounds, pretty hot. That's kind of like this kind of a big band. So he said, look, man, if you don't like it, then let's try it. Look, Chick Corea has like 1 million different band names, so you could just always change it. I said, okay. So we decided to go with it. And then a guy at the label created this logo, which I really liked, which we slap on everything these days, And So and here we are 23 years later, and that's what people call it.
That's awesome. That's a great story. All right. Well, before you go, couple of things. You've got a lot of shows coming up. I know you're going to be playing at NAMM coming up. You're going to be playing at the International Trumpet Guild conference in June,
Yeah.
right? And just a whole bunch of concerts, and also performing with Patti Austin. Um,
Patti Austin right here in Hollywood in January. And then we're playing a gig. I'm not sure if this is on our. There's a lot of them that haven't gotten up on the website yet. A gig at Bonita High School, which was my high school in Laverne, California.
oh,
And so
wow.
now that Robin just passed away, we're going to have to do a special thing for him on
Yeah.
that. I think that's in March, and then we're going to Japan. I think in September. And yeah, I do need to get the website updated because there's a lot of things that have landed that we need to get up there. But it's it's really amazing that we're still doing it after 23 years. Time tempus fugit, people. It goes quick. So
Yeah. But it sounds
if you want to do
fresh.
something,
It sounds fresh. It's
you
you
know
said
why?
23
Well,
years.
because yeah, but we're getting some younger kids in the band now. This is cracking me up. I got kids in the band that go, "Oh yeah, I listened to your band when I was in seventh grade." You know, some of them, were barely born when we when we started the band. So, but it's somehow in the band, the demographics don't really matter because I got people like Eric and Wayne who in their 60s are still killing it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, for some of these younger kids, in their 20s and 30s, they're just loving being able to play with, musicians, Andy Martin, people like that. They're loving given the chance to do that. So that is just so wonderful to think of, that there's a legacy. You know, we have our own legacy for over a couple of decades, but also that the band is a link in the chain. You know, from Count Basie and Buddy Rich and Ellington and everything to current day. It's I couldn't have hoped for anything as wonderful as it's turned out, and hopefully we can get another 20 years in before we spend all the money.
Well, listen, I am, so happy for you and the legacy that you created. And of course, wishing you luck, at the Grammys, for your Grammy nominations that are coming up. This is 2024. And I also, again, want to thank you so much for your time. You're so busy. I'm glad that we were able to make the time to chat and learn more about you.
It was a pleasure. I really appreciated your questions. It's always fun to talk about music with people that are of a like mind.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. All the best.